Hello everyone, it's Infinity Gamer here, and what I've done is I've gone through the ITS Season 12 book and the new Frozen Roads ITS Season 13 mission packs to compare mission by mission, line by line, any changes that have been snuck through that maybe have been missed by most people. There are some quite surprising ones in this, and there's obviously some radical changes between the two which have been more widely covered, but here we're going to go from great big details to granular little ones so that you know what's changed from one to the other if you can't be bothered to read every single line of text in excessive detail. That's what I am here for. So in terms of Season 13, Frozen Roads, we do see some quite significant changes, and that follows the lore in N4. So Cerberus Rising is something that I've covered in a previous lore video, which I'll try and remember to link up there too if you need to catch up. That's why we see a lot of mountain, ice, frozen stuff, because it fits what's happening on Concilium Prima with Cerberus Rising. So definitely get familiar with that, and then that'll help you understand a little bit as to why we're at where we're at in Season 13. So one of the first major changes that you will notice with Season 13 is the scoring in tournaments. If you don't go to tournaments, you don't need to pay as much attention to this as other people, but if you do, you will notice a little bit of a difference here. So in Season 12, a win would net you 3 points, a draw would get you 1 point, and a loss would get you 0 points. There were then bonus points if you won by more than 5 points, or if you got more than 5 objective points, sorry. If you got more than 5 objective points, you would get a bonus point. And if you lost the game by fewer than 2 objective points, you would get a bonus. And a bye would net you the victory points of 3. Sorry, the same points as a victory, not victory points. Same points as a victory, which is 3. In Season 13, we do see a slight changing here. If you win your game, you get 4 points in Season 13. And if you draw, you get 2. It's still 0 points if you lose, and you still get the same points for winning by for scoring 5 objective points or losing by 2. I think there's a mistake in ITS Season 13 because in the buy section of the rules it says that you get the same amount of points as a victory, but in Season 13 it says that's 3. Now I think this is just a carryover from Season 12 where a win got you 3 points and they just haven't changed the text. And then when we ran a Season 13 tournament here in New Plymouth, we were getting scores of 4 points for a bye anyway. So ignore what it says in the text of Season 13. A bye is the same as a victory, which is now 4 points. Now feel free to jump in the comments if you've noticed that mistake as well, or if you think it's not a mistake, just let me know too. But that's the first thing I've noticed, and it's actually fairly early on in the book. Now in 13, Corvus Belli have been a lot more specific about token diameters, which is very handy. I'm glad that they have done this, so that is an excellent little addition to the documentation in Season 13. There are two kind of like season-wide rules that you will notice here. So long service is actually retained from Season 12. That is no change there. And what that effectively does is mean that anyone who has the character keyword also then gets the veteran trooper type bonuses and benefits, which basically just means that in some objectives on the classified objective deck here, characters can complete those missions as well as veteran troop classifications. I'm actually really not a fan of that bit of the rules. I think it would be easier to just do an amendment in the classified objective section to say veteran troop classification and characters can score this mission, and I'm actually going to get to that section of the rules shortly because there have been some significant changes there. This thing I think needs an update anyway, and I think long service is one of the reasons that reinforce why this needs to be updated. Other things that have changed, so Season 13 wide is Tactical Ride. So this means that motorcycles get this new technology that makes them better in the cold. Now there is a bit of fluff in this for the Season 13 crew, if you want to read it, that helps explain why this has come about, but basically bikes get better. Now cynics among us are highlighting that Corvus Belli just wants bikes to be more popular, maybe sell a few more, and especially of the motorised bounty hunter. But, that's just the cynical view. Otherwise, you're going to see more bikers as a result of this rule, which is Tactical Ride. What this is that when you're deploying any biker unit, or any unit with the equipment motorcycle, you can choose whether they're going to remain impetuous and nothing changes, or they're going to gain cover, but they lose the impetuous type. So pros and cons to both. This video isn't about which one you should choose, it's just highlighting the change themselves. All bikers get mimetism -3, which, if you're used to the Lawkeeper, if you're used to the Motorized Knight of Montesa, that's not going to be a major change, and it does not stack, so you don't get -3 plus -3, you just get -3 if you never had it in the first place. And every unit with equipment type motorcycle gets terrain total. Now that is a more significant thing in the future when we look at some of these missions, but that is a key thing that you should be aware of, and that's regardless of whether you choose whether they're impetuous or not impetuous. So choose that at the beginning of the game. So basically bikers are even better now, which is a good thing, because I love taking bikers, and any excuse to do so I will, and now I've got an additional reason. Then when we look through some of this preamble stuff, so you notice we're not even at the missions yet and we're going through some of the significant changes. Well, the missions have some, but we also got some setup to the mission, so bear with me for a moment longer while we go through some of the early bits. So page 13 of the new ITS Season 13 pack contains the updates to the classified objectives that you've seen here, and there's one or two fairly large ones here. For example, I'm going to go run through each of the bits in the book and then explain how they've changed if they have at all. So experimental drug remains exactly the same from ITS Season 13 to from Season 12. Nano espionage keeps much of the 12 update, but adds that you don't need to be engaged, only in silhouette contact to complete that mission. So not a major change, but it just adds something that isn't on the card if you haven't seen it. Identity check remains exactly the same. In extremis recovery is a bit new. So it changes engage to silhouette contact, which is nothing major. You cannot use it if the target is dogged or NWI. So bear that in mind. It's different from what you'll see in the cards, these little bad boys. So bear that in mind. Inoculation stays exactly the same, as in the changes that were first identified in ITS Season 12 just roll over onto Season 13. Retro engineering also remains exactly the same from 12 to 13. Predator has a bit of a change though, so well worth noting this one. So in 12, it said that coup de grace didn't count towards scoring points for Predator. Now in ITS Season 13, that line has been removed, which means we go back to coup de grace counting towards the points for Predator. So bear that in mind if you draw Predator as one of your classified objectives. A coup de grace now will count towards your point scoring. So bear that in mind. So in terms of the missions themselves, very many have stayed the same. We've got the same number of missions from ITS 12 to Season 13. However, we do have a swap. So we have Frostbite, which has come into Season 13 having not been seen for a few seasons. I checked, and the last I could see it was definitely in Season 10. I couldn't find the booklet for 11 to see if that's when it was last there, but definitely featured in 10, and now is back in Season 13. And that has replaced Safe Area, which is now no longer available, which was in Season 12. So that is the biggest change in amongst which missions feature and which ones don't. I must admit that I'm a little gutted that more missions haven't changed. I'm saving a lot of my opinion things for the end, so skip to the end if you want to see how I feel about a lot of these missions, what I think about Season 13, but otherwise this first half is going to be objectively mostly just going through the missions themselves. One thing that Corvus Belli need to note is that when I hosted a mission 2 weeks ago, we had Rescue, admittedly that was Season 12, that didn't come up as one of the missions in the OTM that we could select as a mission, so we had to have that down as a custom. So definitely worth checking to make sure that the OTM has Rescue, especially now that it's definitely carried over from Season 12 to Season 13, so bear that in mind, Corvus Belli. In terms of missions, this section now is going to go through each of the individual missions for Season 13, comparing it to that same mission in Season 12, and obviously for Frostbite, not going to be comparing that, I'm going to be talking about how it is new, but for all of the others I'm going to be explaining to you what has changed from Season 12 to Season 13, so that you're on your toes going into those Season 13 missions without having any assumptions from Season 12 carry over to Season 13. So, let's do it, let's go into the first mission. Acquisition. It's the first one that appears in the Season 13 book, and it retains its spot from the Season 12 book. There have been no major changes to the scoring of Acquisition itself. However, there have been one or two changes deeper within the mission itself. So we noticed a small grammar error or spelling error that could be abused. Now, I'm not saying someone could abuse it, But what I am basically saying is that if someone was reading ITS Season 13 having not played 12, they wouldn't know how 12 had been played to know that that's not the case for 13. The thing here is that under Activate Communication Antenna, it says you have to be in silhouette contact with a console, blah 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 blah. That enables you to make a whip to activate a console. Now reading that, there is nothing to say that the console that you're activating is the one you're touching. So it's always been played that you are only activating the one you're in silhouette contact with, but because it says you're activating a console, someone could reasonably read that and think, well, you just activate a console, not necessarily the one that you're touching. So again, full disclaimer here, how it should be played, at least how I've always known it to be played, and I believe it's supposed to be played, is that you activate the console you're touching, not you can do a whip roll on that one and then activate a different one. Now I think this could easily be fixed, and I don't think it's a problem because I think everyone's been playing this for forever, so you'll know that that's how it's supposed to be played. But if there's a new group starting and they're trying to educate themselves just by reading how it's written, just changing A to the would actually would remove any confusion that could potentially happen in this mission. So again, just remember that it's supposed to be that you're activating the console that you are touching, not just any random one. So just make sure how it's been played properly. And Corvus Belli, if obviously the intention is how it's been played, that you're activating the console you're touching, simply just changing the A to the will mean that there's absolutely no room for confusion anywhere at all. Otherwise, it's every bit the same as Season 12, and in fact that bit is the same as Season 12, there's no change there, but I'm just rereading it and reanalyzing everything, something that I noticed this time. Basically, the new bit that you get for acquisition is Bike Recon. So this is the new rule that features in Season 13, and Bike Recon enables anyone, regardless of faction and army sizes and all of that, to take a free motorized bounty hunter. Now, it doesn't count towards your SWC cost, it doesn't count towards your overall points cost, it doesn't count towards your pool limits. So if you've got 10 already and you get a motorized bounty hunter, you can have 11 in that, but only the motorized bounty hunter can be that extra one. Basically, it's like an invisible ghost free unit that you just plonk down and you can use to complete missions, and that is the key with the motorized bounty hunter. It is a specialist trooper for the purpose of scoring in missions. So definitely use it to get consoles and do everything like that. And remember, it also gets the same bonuses that season-wide rules get for motorbike. So it has terrain total. You can choose whether you're going for the impetuous or the cover version. It gets mimetism -3. Those are all things to bear in mind when you take the motorized bounty hunter. That's pretty much it for acquisition. No major changes in terms of scoring, the mission or anything like that, but you'll see free bikers on the table left, right and centre. Annihilation. The next mission for ITS Season 13. Scoring remains the same for Annihilation as we're used to in Season 12. Most of the mission itself actually remains the same, but with a new Blizzard rule. Now the Blizzard rule is very similar to decompression zones that we would have seen in Season 12, in that you place 2 circular templates. They've got to be outside the deployment zones. It doesn't say that they can't overlap. So again, if that is an intention of Corvus Belli, where you want them to be placed non-overlapping, make sure that maybe that's added into the FAQ, because at the moment you could place them on top of each other if you wished. They are saturation zones, which means that it's -1 burst if you're firing through them. Now remember, if you're splitting bursts, there might be, I think someone explained to me that split bursts in different directions means that you -1 burst on splitting, or overall, I can't quite remember. I need to look into the saturation zones to know this confidently. But another thing to remember is that they are mountain terrain. So if you have mountain or terrain total, hint hint, every biker now gets terrain total, you ignore the negative elements of these zones. Now what that means is that if you move in your first short skill up to touch that mountain terrain circular template, you have to stop your movement straight away and it ends there. And it also stops for the rest of the order, but if you move through again, you -1 inch from your movement profile as it is. So obviously, as I've said, mountain and total terrain, ignore these negative modifiers, so just bear that in mind that bikers can pretty much go through these zones unimpeded. Bike Recon also features in Annihilation, which means you get your free motorized bounty hunter, and as I explained in Acquisition, doesn't count towards anything as in SWC points, probably counts for points towards the end if the mission counts for that. But they will get terrain total themselves, so they will be able to just move through these zones for free. And they're a specialist. But in Annihilation, it doesn't matter because specialists aren't required for any part of this mission, so you can forget that bit with Motorized Bounty Hunters. Now remember, with Motorized Bounty Hunters they have booty, so you get to roll on the booty chart to get extra mods or benefits. If you happen to roll the booty chart result that is Mimetism -6, that doesn't stack with your existing Mimetism -3, it replaces it. So, or you get to choose which you want, although I don't know why you wouldn't want Mimetism -6. But yeah, so you would get Mimetism -6 if you've got the Mimetism -3 already, which every bike now does. Biotechvore. Now this has exactly the same scoring as we saw in ITS Season 12, no changes there. There is a small wording change, however hidden within confused deployment. What it now says is, so Season 12 said any trooper using a special skill to deploy outside the deployment zone must make a whip -3 roll. 13 now says any trooper deploying outside their deployment zone must make a PH -3. I think that's just tidying up. I don't know that it really matters, because the PH -3 was already there as a rule just for deploying outside of your deployment zone. Deploying outside your deployment zone anyway. They've also added an example, so for example, a trooper with infiltration must make a roll if they deploy outside their deployment zone. There will be a -3 mod to deploy in their half of the game table, or a -6 mod to deploy on the opponent's half of the game table. Now this is basically, from what I've seen, so one of my gaming buddies, Bryn, pointed out that this seems to just be adding in something that was an FAQ item from ITS Season 12, pulling that into ITS Season 13, so it doesn't look as though it really majorly changes how the game is played, but it just makes the rule a little bit clearer. So I love that if that is the case. Well done, CB. Capture and Protect. This mission has the same scoring. I promise there are missions with major changes. I know these first ones aren't sounding like it. There are scoring changes in a couple of missions and more, so bear with me, we are going to get to some. Capture and Protect is not one of those because the scoring remains exactly the same. Deployment remains exactly the same. 12 had localized decompression, but that's been dropped. And instead we get Bike Recon added, which is the free motorized bounty hunter that I've already mentioned for Acquisition and Annihilation, I believe. Remember that the motorized bounty hunter is a specialist. It matters in Capture and Protect, so use it to complete the objectives. It's free, it's a throwaway unit. Just get it out there, doing its thing. However, the rest is pretty much the same for Capture and Protect. It's a little bit sad that it hasn't received a bit more of a change, but that's the way it is. Countermeasures. This actually has new scoring, which is great to finally see. So, in Season 12, getting more objectives than your opponent scored you 4 points. In Season 13, it only scores you 2. So that's a really significant difference from one to the other. The same number scored you 2 points in Season 12, and it's now only 1 point in Season 13. So, however, getting your objectives, that's gone from 6 to 8. So it's more important that you focus on just getting your objectives and the scoring there than necessarily stopping your opponent from scoring theirs, because you did get less points for getting more than your opponent rather than what you did in 12. So this may actually change people's strategies in playing countermeasures from 12 to 13. It'll be interesting to see if that actually does, but that's what I noticed initially, is that there's more focus on you just doing your own missions than necessarily actively stopping your opponent from doing theirs. Obviously still a good thing to do because you score points for that, but it's not as much of a focus for the mission. You've got to focus on doing your own objectives, not just stopping your opponent. Blizzard rule added for this one. Now that's the saturation zone templates, similar to the decompression zones that we're used to in Season 12. The main difference between the two is that decompression zones in 12 were 0G type terrain, still -1 burst. Now what we've done is just change those to mountain type terrain. So it's kind of worked the same, but a little bit just slightly different. So again, saturation zone templates, use mountain terrain, -1 burst to shooting through them. You also get a defensive turret in Countermeasures, which is another free unit similar to the motorized bounty hunter. It's an F13 total reaction 360 turret with a combi rifle. Nice to have one of those on the table. Means that you can have a defensive unit that you're not having to worry about and haven't had to pay for. You place those before deployment. They're deployable weapons, not troopers, so that might count in terms of missions and which objectives you can do. So that's one of the key changes to Countermeasures, new scoring, obviously deployable turret, and yeah, basically focus on your own missions. That's the key change from 12 to 13. Decapitation. Scoring remains the same for Decap in 13 as it did 12. Decap's a popular mission, so yeah, haven't changed much there. You've got new Blizzard Saturation Zone templates, which you'll be familiar with from some of the previous missions I was talking about. Again, remember the placement. There's nothing that kind of says that you can't overlap them if you don't want to. Cobblepot will probably include in an FAQ if their intention is for you to not overlap those those Blizzard templates, but at the moment you can. Check the FAQ. If the FAQ has been released, obviously, since this video, please check it as the primary source of information. I'm just highlighting things from the originally launched ITS Season 13 documentation. Decap now includes that F-13 turret, which is the cool Total Reaction 360 combi rifle deployable. Now remember, again, it's a deployable unit. It's not a trooper, which might factor into completing missions and things like that. Turrets are definitely going to be cool for defending your lieutenant in Decapitation, so think that about placement with that thing. It's going to be fairly useful. It will probably actually change how Decap is played quite significantly because there's an extra defensive element there too. You can definitely watch an edge or something for an AD drop troop. Yeah, it's going to be quite cool to see how much that plays into things. Firefight, the next one that we've got to go through. There's no major changes in terms of the scoring. The only change that we have noticed is that localized decompression has now changed to Blizzard. So it's basically the same as we saw with Firefight, apart from it's now Mountain instead of 0G. So everything that we know kind of fits the bill there. Alright, so we get to the first new mission, well, the new mission to Season 13, but as I've said, Frostbite is actually an old mission that has resurfaced in this edition. I like Frostbite quite a bit. I actually had to read through the Season 10 Frostbite version to see how much had changed, and a lot of the core missions still there, so if you're used to playing Frostbite, then you'll be pleased to hear that it's fairly similar in some ways. So how does this work? So that you get 3 points for killing more enemy. Now that's a fun part of this mission as well. Dominating the exclusion zone will get you 3 points as well. Activating a heater will get you 1 point, and you get 3 classifieds to complete here too. The exclusion zone is 8 inches middle strip, so 4 on each side down the centre line of the middle of the field. There is Killer Cold, which is a fantastic little addition here. The idea basically is that any trooper that is outside of a heated zone of the map at the end of the game dies. There are a couple of exceptions to this, so tags don't die, remotes don't die, heavy infantry don't die, and you can also allocate a snow op trooper. That unit will not die at the end if they're outside of a heated zone as well. The snow op trooper is also pretty cool because they get their own order, so be tactical about who you allocate there because they will survive and they might benefit from having their own order at the end too. So things like the heating units are pretty cool themselves. So you activate a heating unit by going to a console, activating the console and then selecting which heating unit you turn on. That heating unit will then turn on and heat anything that's in the zone it's in. So there are 4 heating units. One's in your deployment, one's in your opponent's deployment. Then there's the dead zone, which is the kind of like 4 inches outside of your deployment. There's a heating unit in each one of your ones there. Then the exclusion zone down the middle has no heating units at all. Once you've used a console, it then can't be used again. So actually you can only have a maximum of 3 heating units turned on in the entire game. So you want to make sure that they're the ones on your side. Something to bear in mind with this mission is the heating units protect any unit within that zone. So one of the strategies you could deploy is if your opponent manages to turn on both their heating units, you've only got one, you can move your units into their zones and the heating units will keep your troopers alive as well. A couple of things here is that you can attack heating units, whether they've been turned on or not. They actually fight back this time, which was a bit of a departure from last season where you could kill things like this. So now the things to remember is you cannot berserk a heating unit. No mods work, so if you've got martial arts, doesn't matter. You can't use those mods against these heating units either. You can only use anti-material weapons in CC with the exception of D charges. So with D charges, now first thing that springs to mind for most people is I'll use those in CC because they're pretty good. Don't for these. If you use your decharge and place it as an explosive, it goes off at the end of that order, so it doesn't take an extra order to detonate it. But because it's not a CC attack, your heating unit won't be able to fight back. So if you have decharges, the best thing to do is actually just place them on the heater, let them go off. You don't suffer any attacks back, because getting stunned actually sucks, and that's what would happen if it fights back and succeeds. So yeah, that is something that we noticed, was that actually using decharges as placing them, rather than fighting with them, is significantly better against this particular mission. You also get Blizzard, which means you're placing two templates down, and you also get Bike Recon, so you pretty much get almost all of the toys and all of the new stuff here with this new mission, which is why it's my favourite. It's because it's a big change, it's cool, I love Frostbite as a mission. So you get your motorised bounty hunter. Now don't forget as well, they are specialists, so they can go and get you consoles, which will then turn on heating units, which is fantastic. Now remember that anything that's outside of a heating area at the end of the game dies before scoring happens. So if one of the classified's objectives, if you're thinking about doing secure HVT, make sure you're doing secure HVT with a heavy infantry, a remote, or a tag, because otherwise any other trooper, unless it's just snow ops, is going to die before you can get the points for secure HVT. It's a mistake I made when I played Frostbite for the first time last week, so keep that in mind. So yeah, snow ops, as I've said, it's got to be a model that's deployed as a model, not as a marker or a template. They get a free order just for themselves to use, and they're immune to death at the end. So that would be the perfect example of a trooper to use for something like secure HVT if you're thinking about the point scoring at the end of the mission. Like Frostbite, it's a great mission. I'm very happy that it's come back, and I like the fact that it's mixed things up a little bit from Season 12 to Season 13. Frontline. There's new scoring in Frontline, which is fantastic to see. So you would get 1 point for scoring the sector nearest your deployment zone, and that's down from 2 points in Season 12. Dominating the center zone is 2 points down from 3 in ITS, so we're seeing a bit of a reduction in the points for those first two bits as well. Getting the farthest sector is down to 3 from 4. So as you're kind of maybe getting to, the thing that's getting now bump in points is classified objectives. So that has gone from scoring only 1 point in Season 12 to up to 4 points in Season 13. So as we've kind of seen already, Corvus Belli slightly moving Season 13 towards the classified objectives being maybe slightly more important than they were in Season 12, which is great to see. Frontline, those are the big changes. Otherwise, the rest of the mission stays relatively the same, with one change. Antarctic territory. Now, I haven't mentioned this in any of the previous missions. This is the first time we're talking about it. It basically means that the entire map gives a benefit. So there's no negatives to anything, but if you have terrain total, mountain, or climbing plus, you get plus 1 inch movement to your first movement skill when you move. That's the only time you get it, but remember that all bikes now get terrain total. So any bike in this mission is going to have plus 1 inch to their first movement. Now most bikes move 8 inches already, that's now 9 in their first movement skill. And also something like Climbing Plus, so if you play O12, the Zeta as a tag now gets, funnily, plus 1 inch to its first short skill move, which it didn't really need, but it's fun to see anyway. Highly classified, the next mission we're going to go through. Scoring remains exactly the same for highly classified. In fact, most of it actually remains the same from Season 12 to Season 13 with a couple of exceptions. Your secondary objectives, they stay exactly the same, but you get a new defensive turret in highly classified. So if you haven't seen the previous missions where I've mentioned the F-13 defensive turret, it's a total reaction, 360 visor, combi rifle, deployable. So it's not a trooper, which matters for certain mission objectives, but yeah, this pretty much replaces the localized decompression element that we saw in ITS Season 12 for highly classified. Instead, all decompression and all that sort of stuff disappears, but we get the defensive turrets instead, which is, again, quite an interesting change. They could have just moved it to Blizzard, which would have been exactly the same, but interestingly that they docked the decompression zones and all of that sort of stuff entirely and put the turrets in there in place. Quite a good change, I think. Looting and sabotage, scoring is exactly the same from Season 12 to Season 13. The big change are the AC2s. They get a bit of an adjustment from 12 to 13. So same as what we were talking about with the heater units for Frostbite, now if you use something like martial arts against them, the mods don't apply and they now fight back, which is an interesting mechanic in its own right. There's also a small adjustment to their profile. So they go from a base pH 9 across everything to now a mixed pH value. So for CC and for damage, the AC2s are pH 8, but for things like gizmo kits, they're pH 9. So bear that in mind if you're relying on them being, or if you're thinking that they're pH 9 flat, they're not for CC damage. They go down to 8. Yep, as I said, AC2s now fight back. You can't berserk them. Martial arts mods don't apply. You would be stunned even if you have total immunity. Now that is also the same for the heater units in Frostbite, is that if you have total immunity, you're not immune from being stunned by an AC2 or a heater in Season 13. But it's kind of the same deal as the heating units. If you have decharges, better to place them on the AC2s than it is to fight with them, because at least that way you don't risk getting stunned with the fight back side of things. Now again, Corvus Buddy, you're unlikely to watch this video because you guys have all got better things to do, but if it's not your intention for decharges to avoid the AC2 fighting back, AC2's fighting back in heating units is a new mechanic this season, so we're not sure what the full intention is with avoiding being stunned and attacked back. But if it's not the intention for decharges being placed to avoid that, then it might be required in the FAQ for that to be clarified, because at the moment it's very clear that placing decharges is significantly better because you won't get stunned as a result of doing so. Another change for looting and sabotage, localized decompression is replaced with the Antarctic territory rule, which, as a reminder, adds +1 inch to the first short skill movement profile for anything with terrain total, anything with terrain mountain, anything with climbing plus, and again, as a reminder, all bikes get terrain total this season, so they would automatically get the +1 inch for this mission. Remember that, because it's good to have. Everything else pretty much remains the same for looting and sabotage. Mindwipe. In this one, the scoring remains the same as we are familiar with in ITS Season 12. Same main mission, pretty much, but unlike Frostbite and looting and sabotage with the AC2s, your servers can't be healed, and they also don't fight back. So don't get those confused. Don't assume that every inanimate tech thing is going to fight you back and can be healed. This is a bit different, so read up on the rules for the servers here. There is a bit of a change from ITS Season 12 to Season 13 with the data erasure element of the mission. So to familiarize yourself with that, you could designate a hacker within your army. As with the data erasure, they would have a data tracker. They would get the Uber hacker rule, which is a free order, but they would also be the ones that could do the mission itself. So they'd be able to hack the servers and get rid of the rogue AI. Now, in Season 12, you weren't allowed to assign a troop that had a killer hacking device type hacker as the data erasure unit. That's gone in Season 13. So now, killer hackers can have the data erasure data tracker thing on them. Now that's really cool because, you know, a killer hacker could cybermask with its free new order for being data erasure and then go up to those servers on the other half of the table. It's really going to change how this mission is played, especially because people are now going to swing towards using killer hackers, and that's going to change things up quite a little bit. So very cool. Might really make this feel like a new mission, to be honest. Haven't had a chance to play it yet, but yeah, keep that in mind. Everything else is the same, but I think that's quite a significant change to the mission in its own right. Panic Room. I'm getting more and more confused between Panic Room and Biotechvore, because Panic Room has the Biotechvore Plague, and Biotechvore also has the Biotechvore Plague, but there's the difference that one has a Panic Room in the middle where you can hide, and Biotechvore doesn't. So here there's a bit of a wording changed here, in that Panic Room now says that it's a Biotechvore. ITS Season 12 it was Biotechvore Area. Now that has been changed to Biotechvore Plague Area to make it clearer that it's the Plague. Wording for Confused Deployment has changed, very similar to the other mission where I mentioned that the Confused Deployment had basically taken in an ITS Season 12 FAQ and plonked it into the mission. A new big change, though, is that you can now deploy within the Biotech or the Panic Room in the middle of the arena. You couldn't in Season 12, nothing could deploy within the Panic Room. Now, Season 13, you can deploy within the Panic Room. So big change there, keep that in mind. Obviously with Confused Deployment that's a bit risky, but well worth the shot depending on the mission. Power Pack. there's new scoring for Power Pack. So activating the antennas, if you activate the same number, that has changed from 2 to 1, from Season 12's 2 to Season 13's 1. Activating more has been reduced from Season 12's 3 down to 2 for Season 12. Controlling enemy console is the same at 1, and as you've guessed it, so having your console not controlled by the enemy has actually gone up from 2 in Season 12 up to 3, and it's still 2 classified. So there's definitely more of a swing in this mission to protecting your own console rather than going out for your enemies. Then another change is that there's localized decompression, and that has changed to bike recon for the free motorized bounty hunter. Now that is a specialist, remember, so useful for this mission. It can go around and activate consoles, and especially if you've got the cover with mimetism -3, might stick around for slightly longer. So that is Power Pack, new scoring, more focused on defending your consoles than necessarily just ramboing ahead and attacking the enemy one and taking that out. So Quadrant control. Scoring has remained the same for this mission, no changes there. However, there has been a change in localized decompression. That's now gone and has been replaced with Antarctic territory, which, if you recall from mentioning earlier, but it serves as a good reminder, +1 inch on the first movement skill for anything that has terrain total, terrain mountain, climbing plus. So that is, and now remember obviously that all bikes get terrain total this season, so that's an automatic +1 to the first movement skill of any bikes that you take in your list, and anything with climbing plus as well. And you also get the F-13 defensive turret in this mission, so remember that is a free 360 TR bot. It is a deployable, it doesn't count as a unit, however it is free, and that's quite good for quadrant control and just trying to get the angles to make sure that that's locking up some areas. Rescue, not much to say for this one, I'm afraid. It remains exactly the same as far as I can see from ITS Season 12 to Season 13. I'm mentioning it here, it's not in Season 13, but if you're thinking it's the same comparison, ITS Season 12 had Safe Area, that has been removed. For Season 13 no longer features, been replaced by Frostbite. So that's a change from 12 to 13. So supplies, we actually see new scoring for this mission in Season 13. In Season 12, you got 1 point for controlling a supply box. That has now gone up to 2 points in Season 13. In Season 12, you would get 3 points for controlling more boxes than your opponent. That's now gone down to 1, so quite a significant drop there. And then if adversary controls none, you get 1 point down from 2, and then you get the same number of classifieds in this mission. So it definitely looks as though the scoring has been adjusted ever so slightly to instead focusing on getting 1 and then crushing your opponent, is basically to just get the supply boxes and not quite focus so much on crushing and annihilating your opponent, which we have seen in a couple of missions as we've gone through them for Season 13, is that there's basically more of a focus taken away from just oppressing your opponent and drive them into the ground. So maybe this is a balancing act for CB to try and make it more fun for people who are losing. Who knows? Supremacy. Scoring has remained the same from Season 12 to Season 13, and most of the mission itself actually remains the same for what you're familiar with. However, there's now the addition of the F-13 turret. So you get a free 360 TR combi rifle deployable, just for turning up, which is going to be fun. I'm not sure how much it's actually going to change Supremacy as a mission. I feel like people could have done similar with their list building anyway, so interesting to see whether that's actually a bit of a game changer and makes it feel like a different mission, like we've seen with some of the other changes in other missions, might actually make that feel very different. The Armory. Scoring has remained the same in Season 13. Most of the mission has actually remained the same. The only change that we've spotted from Season 12 to Season 13 here is localized decompression has gone, and that has been replaced with Antarctic territory, which is a new feature for Season 13. Now, as a reminder, if you have terrain total, terrain mountain, climbing plus, you get +1 inch to your first first movement value if you're moving. All bikes get terrain total this season, so just remember that if you're taking any bikers. Unmasking. everything remains the same. Sorry, no changes there. So in terms of final thoughts on Season 13, changes, I like the changes to the scoring. It seems definitely to focus more on classifieds. Most obvious one in that is Countermeasures and Frontline, where classifieds are a lot more important than the original mission objectives. A couple swing to being a bit more defensive in how you play. So Power Pack's a prime example. The mission's going to be changing so that people are a bit more defensive than aggressive in that sense. Blizzard is cool, but in most cases it just replaces the decompression that we saw. So basically, instead of 0G getting the benefit, it's now Mountain and Total, which was the same as 0G. So not a major mission change where that has featured. F-13 turrets might make things a little bit trickier. Again, as more of the missions are focusing on being defensive, I think being aggressive is going to be a little bit tricky. Maybe that's, to try and balance out any Alpha Strike lists and ways of playing. Heaters and AC2s fighting back is a nice new challenge, but obviously really easily circumvented by just placing D-charges instead of fighting with D-charges. Again, not sure if that's intentional, but that's a big thing there. Deploying in the panic room might be an interesting change for Season 13 that we haven't seen so far. In terms of overall, parts of me love Season 13, but parts of me just see the missed opportunities and wish that more had been done. I wish Corvus Belli would just overhaul the missions for each season with ITS. Just replace it with 10, 12 new ones. I think it's 10 missions I've just gone through. It might be 12, but either way, just go for new missions each and every season. So again, it kind of feels a little bit stale, just playing the same names and the same missions season after season. There are small, minor adjustments to many of the missions here, mostly in scoring, which might make them feel different enough for it to not be just same old, same old. But I do just wish they would just new missions every season. It would be a lot more exciting to play, and it's a bit more of a change to the game than new additions to the game itself. Bike recon and tactical ride obviously attempts to make people take more bikes, and I don't know that I love that. I like it when lists or factions encourage you to take more bikes because they're cheaper and because it kind of makes more sense for different missions. But I don't like a season-wide, here everyone, take more bikes. And in fact, here's a free one if you haven't taken bikes before. Look, they're fun, trust us. Yeah, I don't know that I necessarily love that element of things, and this comes from a guy who generally has a bike in every list that I take. I just think that maybe game is getting to a state where we just don't want to see the same missions over and over again. Obviously, Corvus Belli ran the competition where users could submit missions, and they had around, I think it was around 60 submissions for that. It did only come a couple of weeks before the new season dropped, so I think the timing maybe didn't suit really. Or it got you thinking about missions ahead of the new season. But I just think that next year, for Season 14, what they should do is look at those 60 missions and just go, hey, look, are there 12 here that we could use in Season 14, and just do a complete overhaul of the missions and just don't retire these forever. Maybe in Season 15 you can then bring back one or two favourites, but I just, don't be afraid of change. Everyone can turn around and just go, hey, look, Season 13 sucked because the missions were rubbish. But at least there would be change and there would be something new. The idea is to push competitive players, especially outside of the comfort zone, to not just take the same list that they know will do very well. And I think the way to do that is by doing brand new missions every single time. Yeah, I wished it hadn't pushed the unit type so much. Frostbite's really cool, but I think it's partly cool because it's new and not necessarily because the mission is like super challenging in any new ways. And I think that is why I lend myself to just going just overhaul the entire mission pack for every season, because change is good, keeps us excited, keeps us on our toes, makes our factions feel fresher because we might be taking units that we wouldn't be taking with the same old, same old. So please, Corvus Belli, for Season 14, just change all of the missions to different ones to what we've been seeing historically. And yeah, what do you think? Jump in the comments. Do you agree with that? Had you noticed some of the changes that I'd spotted from ITS 12 to 13? Are there any that I missed that you feel should be included? Please let me know. I would love to know about that. And again, yeah, what are your thoughts on tactical rides? What are your thoughts on Antarctic territory? What are the thoughts on bike recon? Some of the new things that have come into Season 13. Do you love them or do you loathe them? And what do you think about what Corvus Belli should think about ahead of Season 14 in a year's time? Should it be all new missions, or do you like the ones that are in there and you don't think there should be any major changes? I'm really excited to see your thoughts on this, so please jump in to let me know how you think. And again, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it, and I'll be back soon with another video.